Welcome to the American Citizens Abroad podcast. Today we are chatting with Kalie from the site Expats Everywhere. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. Let's start at the beginning. Could you tell us a bit about your own story and how you landed in Portugal?
Sure, happy to do so. So I actually left the US in 2009. Mainly, I had graduated university and I was wanting to go abroad, like do a study abroad in university, but I didn't want to go by myself. So I was adventurous, but not that adventurous, and I couldn't find anyone. And then my senior year, about halfway through, I found who is now my husband, who was going to a different university, and he had already graduated and he was talking about moving abroad, but we started dating. And I said, wait for me and I'll go with you. We have different reasons as to why we wanted to go abroad, but we met and we're like, okay, we have someone to go with. After I graduated in 2009, and like I said, he was a little older, so he was working, he finalized that, and then we moved abroad. And our first place was actually Spain. And then from there, we kind of made a 5-year plan or so. We got married and said, let's do this for about 5 more years, and then we'll move back to the US. But as we got going, both of us, thankfully, were on the same page and we were like, no, let's just keep exploring. So we went from Spain to South Korea to Saudi Arabia to Singapore. And then now we're in Portugal, and we've been in Portugal for 5 years. It's the longest place we've ever lived. But we've also added to our family. We have a daughter now. We want to be a little more stable, I think. When we lived in Spain, we really loved Porto, Portugal specifically. And so when we were in Asia for so long, we thought, let's get back to the European lifestyle. And Porto was a place we knew we would want to live. So that's kind of how we landed here.
What inspired the creation of Expats Everywhere, and what gap were you originally trying to fill in the expat world?
What inspired it really was a lot of people asking us, how are you doing what you're doing? For example, my husband's dad would say, I have a colleague who has a daughter who wants to move abroad. And so I said, well, talk to them. And I found on Facebook, I'd get a lot of people writing me who were just some way related through a friend or a family member. They would say, we want to do what you're doing. How can we do it? And so we found that we were almost consulting a little bit, and we thought, oh, we could make this into a business. And then with the way that we moved around as well, it seemed like every couple of years we were having to update our CVs and start looking for jobs. And one day Josh was like, I pay someone to just do this for me. And so with the helping people do it and then the logistical side of CVs and finding jobs, we thought we could put a business together here. YouTube started as more like lead gen, I guess you could say. So just getting the word out there that we exist and then funnel it into our services. Then we found that we actually enjoyed the content creation a lot more, and we started going more into YouTube. We obviously have a website called Expats Everywhere, but then YouTube is our biggest social media, I guess you could say. We create videos, and then we just evolved how we found the need that what people were asking for.
And what are the most popular destinations among your audience right now, and why?
Europe is really popular. We moved during COVID times, and so I think a lot of people were just watching what's everyone else doing. And so Portugal became popular, but then our channel became popular as well because people could see us going through the actual process. We help a lot of people moving to Portugal, and Portugal and Spain are really similar as well. Portugal and Spain are definitely high on everyone's list. The Iberian Peninsula has a lot of similarities. I think Americans for the longest time thought, I want to live in Europe. It would be a dream to live in Europe. I don't know how. And now we're seeing that there are a lot of doors that are open. And whether that's through ancestry, because some are finding family ties, which is a great way to get a visa or get citizenship. But then other visas or remote work, or just the options are a lot more available nowadays. I think our audience, it's a lot more Europe, I would say. We don't really help too much with those in Central and South America. I think that there are other channels and other services that do that. We are a lot more focused on Europe, specifically definitely Portugal and Spain, but we're trying to get a little more out there. We have a secondary channel called Expats Everywhere Explorers that does a little more of just around Europe as well. Portugal, Spain, France is really big. Italy's also big, sometimes a little bit of Greece, but I would say those are the main ones right now.
And are there any destinations that work especially well for the first-time American expat?
It's hard because every culture is a little different. You have to definitely adapt. It's going to be different than the United States. All of these are good options. A lot will also depend on what city you end up in, what visa you come in on, how much assistance you actually get. If you try to do it yourself, sometimes you can run into a lot of headaches and problems. But then if you're paying for someone, then financially it could be a lot. I don't know if there's one that's better than the other or very easy to get into. All of them will have their challenges. But all the ones I named, Portugal, Spain, Italy, are nice places to live. And so as long as you do your research, do your homework to make sure it works out for you, then I think you can adapt easily.
And not to be negative, but to go back to the challenges you mentioned, what's the biggest hurdle Americans face when planning a move abroad?
I think the biggest hurdle is just not knowing where to start, not knowing who to trust. If you go online, there are so many options for things, which is great. But then you don't know if someone's reliable. So my recommendation is always to see if you can chat with a real person about their feedback on the service that they use or who they hired. So I think a big hurdle is people get paralyzed and they just don't know where to start. And sometimes the information can be overwhelming. And so it's like, I want to move to Europe, but I don't know where. So then you have to start narrowing it down to the country that fits you, because there's a lot of criteria to think about. Like I mentioned the visas, but then also you've got taxes, you've got weather, you've got the lifestyle that you want to live. Do you want it to be more outdoorsy? Do you want to have mountains? There's all these things to consider. And so I think that the biggest hurdle is people are just like, I don't even know where to start. And so I'm just not going to do it because it's overwhelming. So I think you just have to take it little by little.
And are there any countries with surprisingly easy or straightforward processes for US citizens to relocate to?
I would love to say yes. It depends again on what visa you want. Some are a little more straightforward for the visa style that you have. Like if you're coming in with passive income, or if you're retired and it's kind of straightforward, or maybe remote work, or if your company has a base in one of these countries, and that actually makes it really easy for the sponsorships and for getting the visa. I think they all have their challenges. Some are better than others, and it kind of ebbs and flows as well. For example, right now, Portugal's really backed up with their visa processing. You'll get all these negative things online about how it's terrible to try to get into Portugal, but it wasn't like that a couple of years ago. And then you're going to have that happen in a few months in another country. So it kind of ebbs and flows. There's just a lot of variables as to what visa you're coming in on and where you are in the process and where they are in the processing.
Are there any misconceptions Americans may have about working legally overseas?
I think probably the biggest misconception is you don't have to tell your employer that you're moving overseas. If your company is not sending you overseas, but they say you can work quote unquote from anywhere or remote, just because you can work anywhere in the US doesn't mean that you could move and live outside of the US. They might let you work while you're traveling, but actually being a resident of somewhere else has implications for them, tax implications. They have to file differently. They have to claim that you work for the company but reside outside the US. So I think there's a misconception that you can just pick up and go, but you actually do need to have that conversation with your company or HR or whoever you need to talk to, your boss, to get the clearance there that you're allowed to. And then the other misconception I think is probably once you leave the US, even if you're working or not working, that you don't have to file taxes. So you definitely, as a US citizen, you always have to file taxes. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be paying taxes, but you do have to file taxes.
And that brings me to my next question. What are the most frequent financial surprises Americans encounter once they move abroad?
That's definitely one of them. You should always do your research on what the taxes are like in the country that you're moving to as well, because especially in Europe, they can get pretty high into the 40th percentage. Now, a lot of them use a progressive scale as well, so it doesn't have to scare you, but you definitely want to think about your tax situation before you move, because also there's a lot of prep work you can do before you move to make sure that you minimize your tax burden in your new country. So doing that before you actually become a resident is important. So financially, just knowing that you will then have to file taxes in the country you live in. And then as a US citizen, you definitely have to file in the US as well. And then financially, I think something that trips people up is a lot of people will move to Europe because of the affordability. There's certain things that they're like, this is going to be more affordable. And so they feel like their budget can be X amount and it's lower than their budget in the US. But then they get here and they realize I'm eating out more, I'm drinking out more, there's more to do. It's exciting as well. There's new things to see, new things to do. You're meeting people and you're going on trips together. Europe is so accessible because you can just jump on an easy flight. So you're spending a lot more money than you probably thought you would. Just keeping that in mind and tracking your finances the first few months once you move is really important to see where you are spending your money. Just living normal, live your normal life. But then after a couple months, if you're like, whoa, my eating out budget is way more than I thought before moving, then either up your budget a little bit or then pare that back. I think that you need to definitely have a budget before you come and make sure that travel and getting around is part of that, because once you're here, you're going to see how easy it is to move around and you're going to want to do that a lot.
Do you think Americans underestimate the tax implications of remote work from abroad?
I don't know if they underestimate. Generally, if you're working remotely, then you probably have already looked into it, what that's like. But that is something that you need to make sure you do before you plan your move, is just make sure you research what the taxes are like in the country you're moving to and what the taxes are like for you in the US now, because there are differences as well. You will file differently. You'll get different extensions and loopholes because you're a US citizen, but you're not a resident. So making sure that you're doing that before you actually move is important. If you do that before, then you're not really surprised once you're in the country that you move to, but also finding an expert accountant in the country you move to who understands expat taxes is really important. So the fact that you are not a citizen of that country is really important for correct filing.
What cultural pitfalls tend to trip up Americans in their first 6 months living abroad?
It's hard because I think the first 6 months you can kind of be in the honeymoon stage. So you'll say, oh, nothing, it's amazing and everything is great. But then real life will set in, because especially when you travel somewhere, it's very different to when you move somewhere. But the first few months almost feels a bit like traveling, because you're learning about your new city and your new country and you're setting up life and you're meeting people and you're finding out all the new things. Sometimes it takes a little longer, I would say, than 6 months, but then you start to notice the little things that maybe you just brushed off that weren't annoying will start to annoy you. Being able to handle those is really important. Maybe the little cultural things at first you thought, oh, it's fine, but then they start to slowly annoy you. Just knowing how to handle what that looks like when they start to annoy you and how you can adapt. You just have to go in with really low expectations or zero expectations as to what life is going to be like, because it will be different than what you know in the US. Definitely, no matter where you move to. Even if you stick around a lot of expats wherever you're moving to, it still will be different. So if you go in with optimism and just thinking, I'm going to have no expectations, I'm just going to go with the flow, and I know that things might be difficult bureaucratically here, or culturally they do things like this, standing in lines or whatever it might be, that could be annoying because it's different. If you go in just saying, you know what, I'm here and I'm going to adapt, and then you'll just be a lot happier. And if you can't adapt, then maybe it's time to think of a new place to move to.
What is the number one piece of advice you give an American planning their first move abroad?
Don't overpack. This is one I see a lot. A lot of people want to bring everything. And I get it. If you've lived in the same home for 20 or 30 years, you accumulate a lot. And there's a lot that's sentimental. So this is where it gets really tricky. Where do you put this stuff? Do you store it? Do you sell it? Do you have an estate sale? Do you give it to your kids? Sometimes it's stuff that is sentimental to you, but your kids are like, I don't want that. So then what do you do with it? So this is always really tricky, but I think that a lot of people think I'm going to bring everything over, but you have furniture shops here and you can get all those types of things over here. I had one lady was like, I can't part with my KitchenAid blender. And it's like, well, the voltage will not work here. And they have KitchenAid blenders here that are exactly the same. So you're better off selling it, trying to get a little money from it so that you can buy it over here. Don't overpack. I mean, if you could buy a couple extra suitcases for clothes and shoes and those things on the plane, that's better, I think, than shipping. Now, I do know that everyone's a little different and has different lifestyles and where they're moving to. If they've bought a home and they want to furnish it with the stuff from the house they're selling in the US, okay, it's a little different. Think about what you really need, and you can always buy stuff in your new place. Or if you do like a storage unit for a little bit because you're not sure, you can always go back and go through that instead of just bringing it all over at first, because then you just have a lot of stuff and it makes setup and the beginning part of life could be a little more difficult. So just don't overpack.
Is there one mistake that almost every American expat makes at least once?
One mistake. That could actually, yeah, don't overpack. That could be one thing that goes along with the other question as well. Mistakes, I think, vary depending on your experience with travel. But again, even if you're a seasoned traveler, moving somewhere is a little different. I think a big mistake that a lot of Americans make are the different, I guess you could say, schemes or little tricks that the locals do to try to get money. They're very unique, and some of them are really smart actually to get you into giving a little change or giving money. So I think that every expat and even travelers make the same mistakes as well. But once you move to a place and you start seeing, oh, that's the same lady who's doing this, you don't make the mistake of giving her change. I've had a lot of friends who will come visit and they'll say, oh, this poor lady she's saying, oh, she just needs a couple coins for the metro because she can't make quite enough. It's like, this lady lives here. So just knowing those little tricks, I think you got to be aware of that.
Do you think the definition of American expatriate is changing, and how?
I don't think it is. I mean, we've known Americans to move like this for quite a while. Maybe for some, it's a newer term. And actually, some people don't even know the term expatriate. So that's always interesting to unpack. I guess you could say it's changed in a little bit. For a while, it was a lot more of companies were sending their workers to a different country. And then this is kind of where expat came from. Generally, those contracts would be for a couple years, or it wasn't extended. It wasn't like you were moving long term. It was a bit more like that. You'd come in on an expat package. So that type of move would be different. Now I think you're seeing a little more of people retiring and wanting to live somewhere else because their money goes a little further, or they're just at a stage of life where they're not working anymore. They can experience something different. But I think a lot of people have been doing that in Central and South America for quite a while. It's just that that American expatriate has just more been in the Central American area, those countries, Central or South. And now I think Americans are seeing that they can easily do it in Europe. And so I don't know if it's really changed. It's just maybe widened.
And what are some up and coming destinations Americans aren't talking about, but they should be?
Well, I'll stick to Europe. I do actually think that there's a lot to offer in Asia, and that might be a little shocking for some because it is quite different, but there are a lot of good qualities of Asia. But as far as Europe goes, Croatia is, I think, up and coming, and then Bulgaria and Romania, they just recently joined the Schengen, and Croatia is fairly new as well. So I think that these are countries that they're beautiful. They're still a little untouched with a lot. Affordability is really good. But then the fact that they've joined the Schengen, we're going to see prices will go up because of this, but we will see a lot of perks in these countries where infrastructure will just continue to get better, bureaucracy and so on. So I think that some of the more Eastern European countries are the ones to look out for.
If there's one myth about Americans living abroad you'd like to dispel, what is it?
That Americans are loud. I think that I hear so many Americans say, oh, I know we're the loud Americans. And it's like, if you've traveled and you've lived in a lot of places, there are a lot of cultures and nationalities that are louder than us, and you can spot them from a mile away. I feel like almost this was a French thing. People would go to Paris because a long time ago, or I mean, not even that long ago, but Americans, when they would think of, I'm going to Europe, they would go to Paris, they would go to Rome, maybe they'd go to Barcelona. These were the top places. So I think the Parisians aren't the kindest of people, I would say, and that's to anyone. So I think that the whole quote unquote loud American might have come from there, might have come from something else. But if you are around enough, you see that, okay, there are loud Americans, of course, but there are also other nationalities that are extremely loud too. So to say stereotypically that Americans are loud, I think would be false. So I would like to say that that's not true.
And do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share today?
When we started Expats Everywhere so long ago, the main thing I would tell people, they'd be like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know if I can. And there's always reasons for you to not do it. You want to do it, but you've got elderly parents you have to be close with. Financially, you don't know if you can do it. You have small kids. There's always something. It's a lot more of a mobile world. So everyone is moving around. For example, here in Portugal, if you want to have kids and you don't have them yet, there's hospitals here and people are having babies here. You can do it. Or work-wise, you're not sure if you can. If finding a country that your cost of living can be lower or your healthcare can be lower so you can save money there, just so you can have a better work-life balance. There's that as well. Just obviously making sure that you're making smart financial moves, you're doing your research, and you're setting yourself up for success in the future. I think a lot of people do think, I can't do this. And again, like I said earlier, not knowing where to start can always be a little scary. If you want to do this, look into it. We've talked with people who they think they want to do it, and then when they start explaining their why and why they want to do it or their criteria, and it's like, that's a little unrealistic. Sometimes we've had to talk people off the ledge and say, you won't be happy moving to this country for these reasons. I think that if you are really interested in it, we do live in a world now that technology has made it much easier to do these things, to research, to communicate with people, to stay in touch with people. So if you want to do it, just lightly start looking and finding trustworthy and vetted resources and services to help. You can make this happen if you want to.
Kalie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me.
The content of ACA podcasts, including documents and presentations, is made available only for general information purposes. It is not intended and should not be treated as legal, financial, or tax advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of American Citizens Abroad, Inc. or any affiliated organization. ACA does not warrant the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of any content or other information. ACA disclaims all liability and responsibility arising from any reliance placed on any content or information by you or any other person. ACA is nonpartisan and does not support any political party or candidate.